Rishi Sunak has been criticised, again I know, for announcing a surprise round of honours which included 4 Tory MPs and a major donor to the Conservative Party. Mohamed Mansour gave 5 million to the Tories in 2023 and is a senior treasurer at the party. Labour's chair, Annalise Dodds, reacted to the news on GB News Breakfast this morning by saying this.
It seems to be an almost automatic pass now under the Conservatives, and particularly the individual, Mr Mansour, who was last January, the biggest ever donor to the Conservatives, £5 million at that stage, the biggest individual donation that had been given, then seeming to have that automatic pass through to receiving an honour under Rishi Sunak. I think, if anything, it demonstrates yet again his weakness, that he's focused on internal party issues all of the time rather than on the needs of our country.
OK. Now, one of the 4 MPs to receive an honour, Sir Philip Davis, who represents Shipley, gave his reaction to Britain's newsroom on GB News this morning. I asked him what he thinks is done to deserve the honour. Bit cheeky.
It's not for me. It's not for me to decide that. That's for other people, and people will have their own opinion about whether any honour is merited or not. And you only have to look at social media, and you'll see that some people think it's the best decision that Rishi Sunak's ever made, and some people think it's an absolute disgrace. And 'twas ever thus, I suppose. But it's not for me to say whether I deserve it or not, or what I've done. It's for, like I say, I did award it to myself.
Spoken like a true politician, didn't actually answer why he thinks he got a gong. I mean, you must know, surely. But this brings me to ask, do we need to reform the honours system? I mean, is it really, you know, giving gongs for your mates, basically? And, you know, who do we think deserves these honours? Is it people that are just mates of Rishi Sunak? Let me ask my panel about this one. Now, basically, at this time of year, Paul, most of us are giving Easter eggs to our mates. Rishi Sunak has to go one better and give people gongs.
Well, the whole system needs to be democratised, or it needs to be abolished, because this makes people very cynical about the whole honours system. How can it be right that someone gets a knighthood for having donated £5 million to the Tory party, and within a year he gets a knighthood? The idea that this has been given to him for his, you know, public service, for, as they claim, services to charity, and it is not in any way linked to the fact that he's given mega millions to the Conservative Party. The biggest donation the Tory party has received, by the way, for something like 23 years is arrant nonsense, and I think it's an insult to people's intelligence. There should be something like a time bar, I think, where major donors have given large amounts of money, whatever the limit should be, large amounts of money to a party, that they should be barred from, you know, getting a knighthood, being elevated to the Lords for a certain amount of time, whether it's 5 years, 8 years, 10 years or whatever, because the reason that they give them to them is because they're inviting more donations. The reason that Rishi Sunak is giving him, you know, the knighthood is because he wants to send the message to people, look, if you donate millions to the Tory party, then this is what you get in return. If you're a rich businessman and you're after being elevated to the Lords, or you're after a knighthood, if you're a woman, you want to become a dame, give us a few million quid and this is what happens. And the problem is it makes the whole thing seem completely corrupt. And for ordinary people out there, many of whom I would give a knighthood to far before I would give it to this person, I have to say, they think it's just the old boys network. They think it's, you know, you scratch my back, I scratch your back, jobs for the boys, that kind of thing. It makes people rightly very cynical.
Well, isn't this the problem, Benedict? Are anyone in the Tory party, Rishi Sunak, listening to what people are thinking and saying out there? This is the worst move in the world, especially seeing, you know, we had the dodgy donor story the other week, didn't we, with Frank Hester, who actually was the biggest donor, giving 10 million. Is he going to get a gong next year?
Do you think this is going to massively affect their polling, given how badly they're already doing? Do you think they care? I think this is the exact right moment if you're going to reward your mates, because you're not going to get back into office for a good few years.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? This is the other thing. Is it the timing, just before Easter? I mean, is it signalling that they know they're a busted flush? I
think that this is a very good way of drumming up support in the short term, but also in the long term, given that the opportunities for actually handing out gongs are going to be very thin on the ground, to be able to say to people, well, look, you know, there are opportunities for you to get things perhaps in the future. It might take 10 10 years until you get your hands on them. But still, I think that this is a mechanism, therefore, for, as you say, potentially for drumming up support or for incentivising people. It's also, we've got to be clear, it is a way of incentivising people of getting involved in politics in a way who might otherwise not be interested. Actually, we're very good at excluding businessmen and women from this country, partly because the pay in politics is so poor. You need other things to incentivise people to get into it. And I'm afraid one of those things are things like knighthoods. Now, I would say that most people actually do accept that it's a bit dodgy, it's a bit rotten, but actually nowadays, most people do not really care if somebody is Lord Who's-it of Whatsittville. They don't. A title is no longer the sort of thing that carries any great weight because they're not landowners, they don't, it doesn't carry sort of any great power. It is literally something you give to somebody who has given a political party a lot of money, to which most people would go, OK, I'd quite like being a knight, but I don't actually think that
I think what it does is it adds to the whole perception of cronyism. And I don't think people are. As relaxed about it. As you say, I'm not necessarily suggesting that when they go into the polling booth on general election day, that it's going to affect their vote at the ballot box. But it just gives the general impression that, the Westminster elite are completely removed from us. They don't understand our lives. They don't understand people outside the M25. You've got Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt, who have got wealth beyond what most ordinary people could possibly imagine, and they're giving gongs out to their mates who are also mega multi-millionaires. And I think to ordinary people out there, while it may not be decisive on election day, it does add, I think, to the general sense of alienation and the general contempt that people hold the
general sense of alienation. But I just don't think it's that important a thing. OK, let's give a nurse somewhere in Surrey or Wolverhampton, let's give them a damehood. Fantastic. Does that actually change their life fundamentally? No, it has absolutely no impact at all. It is of very little value, other than to say congratulations on doing a sterling good job. Now go back to work in the system that doesn't quite work. If it's a nurse, they could
just always pay her what she probably worth.
But this is exactly the point. What does a knighthood actually cost? It costs what you pay to a political party or what you put into the political system. Actually, if you hand a knighthood out to a charity worker, a nurse, or whoever, what does it actually do to improve their lives? Nothing. That's why I say most people will look at this and go, yeah, it doesn't really seem very fair. But ever thus was it. It's always been a way of rewarding the friends of the state, let's be clear, and it doesn't actually affect materially ordinary people's lives. You're right to say what is perhaps of more interest to people is saying, OK, great, you're giving this person a knighthood because he donated 5 million. What is your track record in government? What are we getting for that 5 million?
But the message is, Benedict, the message it sends is that we as a society do not value productive labour, that actually the nurse or the person who spent 30 years sweeping the streets is
or the lollipop lady, we always mention the lollipop lady.
The people who do really important, socially productive work in their community, commit to their community, give value to their community day after day, year after year, have got no chance for the most part of getting a look in. But if you're a captain of industry, if you work in the city, if you're the head of a financial institution or a bank, if you're a media mogul, then you've got every chance of getting into the Lords or getting a knight. And what it does is it speaks to the fundamental unfairness of our society and the fact that it is a class-ridden society. I mean, people like to claim it's increasingly a classless society. Actually, I think we're seeing more divisions.
I agree with you. I agree with you completely. But the honour system doesn't signify that. The fact that this is the fact that this is a country that is run entirely off of accumulated unearned wealth is actually the sign. Manifestation, but it is right at the bottom. And this is why I say what actually matters to people. Is it so and so getting a gong that says you're a knight now, or is it things like building houses? Is it things like building reservoirs? And that's why I say, OK, it's an irritant. But what I care a lot more about is saying, what do we get for the political donation that puts a party in government? I'm much more irritated by the record of the Conservative Party in government on their failure to do things than on whether or not they decide to hand out a few knighthoods.
I'm irritated by that as well.